Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a second submission by Lisette of her horse Timo. It was only a couple of weeks ago that we saw the last video of this horse, and she had done a really great job, and I can only say this one is even better. This is just about perfect the way you're working this horse today, so really, really great job to say that starting out, and everyone should really take a look at this one. So really great stretch in the walk there, really active and stepping a lovely 4-beat walk, so just the kind of stretch that we want. Now you'll notice with this horse that very often his neck is almost straight down. That is perfectly okay. And what we often find is that when horses haven't had a lot of top line, and when we get them to stretch, they really don't have enough top line to even hold their neck up and out. So if they go all the way down and seem to stretch further than, some people will say you should never stretch a horse down that far, but nothing could be further from the truth. If they don't have the muscling to even hold their neck up, they need to be all the way down until they develop some. So what you'll find is, don't be worried about this horse being a little bit stretched down as farther than you might think you want, but it's not really. What you'll find is as it goes, and even as you go here, this neck goes out and further and starts to lift up. So as horses develop, very often, as I said, when we have horses that have never stretched before and we actually get them to work over their backs and they drop the head and neck down, there's no top line there at all. So their necks kind of plunge to the ground. You'll see me doing that with those two young ones that I have that I'm working with now, Fuego and Salinera. But this is really good, so don't worry about that. Just know that will, as the horse develops top line, the neck will come up almost by itself, in the sense that it will start to be, certainly will be carried out and away from the body a lot more than it normally does. So this is really good work here. Really good active swinging walk. Very, very, very nice. This is just how we'd like to start off every day. A really good 4-beat walk, very rhythmic and very regular. Just exactly what we want. So this is really good. Doing a great job of keeping the right kind of contact, that is just keeping the slack out of the reins, and that's exactly what you should be doing. So this is all really good. Nice work through there. And we can see, taking a look at this horse, as we said before, if you look behind the saddle there's a little bit of a dip in the horse's back there behind the saddle. You're going to see that fill up very quickly now that you have this horse working like this. It's going to take no time at all. And you'll begin to see huge improvements over this horse's top line, because you've got this horse fully working over his back in this exercise today. So really great work. And once again, now, if you want to think about, it's perfectly fine to ride with your hands wide the way we do when we're just schooling these horses. So that's really about right. If you wanted to equitate a little more, you certainly could, bring your hands a little more together in front of you. But I don't worry about that kind of thing at this level at all. So really about where you are is really quite good, and I don't see anything wrong with your position. Once in a while, I would say maybe you should just stretch your upper body up a little bit and flatten your shoulder blades into your back just a little bit more, so you're just, every once in a while, you're a little bit round-shouldered forward, but really that's nothing. And the beauty of the classical system, once again, when you learn to ride like this, you have no horse to hang on to, so you're going to develop correct balance. As I said, so many riders that we see today, if you cut the reins, they'd fall off backwards off the back of the horse because they're really holding themselves in the saddle against the horse's mouth. Really good leg yield right there, no loss of rhythm. That was absolutely excellent. Once again, keeping this nice swinging walk. So your tempos in this, your question was, are your tempos about right for the walk and trot? And actually they are. They're pretty much right on here, and such a huge improvement over the very first time that I saw you, even to the point that you're able to sit to the trot some in this workout. So that's really great. Once again, another good leg yield right there, and that's just about right. And I liked how you brought your right rein there to the inside a little bit when you needed to. That was perfectly fine. It's perfectly all right to use open leading reins with young horses, and when we're first getting them to get into the stretch and that sort of, by an open leading rein, I mean just bringing your whole hand to the inside, letting your fingernails turn up. If you do that, that's perfectly fine. The outside rein should pretty much stay where it is. They're close to the horse's neck on the outside. And the inside ones can certainly come in. So just the way you're doing that is really just about right. And once again, you're doing a great job of keeping the slack out of the reins, and what a wonderful walk this horse has. I'm even just going back and looking at the video that you sent in only a few weeks ago or a month ago, whenever that was. But this is pretty much well improved over that, and everything is really going just exactly as you'd like it to go here. There's not a single thing about this I don't like. So really, really well done. Now a little shoulder in here, that's not bad. Maybe try a little bit too much angle, I feel, for this horse. So try again, when you try those, just don't try to get for quite so wide an angle. All we want to do is we want about a 3-track. That is, the outside foreleg should be tracking about the same as the inside hind leg. So not quite so wide. Really great walk here, stretching into the contact. Once again, look how beautifully relaxed this horse here is, and how he stays that way through this entire workout. And it's so great to hear from Lisette. She told me that in an email that some of her friends there are starting to watch her, and people are getting interested in this type of riding. So it's really wonderful to see. You know, if one person sets an example, you know, people are monkey see, monkey do. But the biggest problem for people is they've never really seen correctly worked horses. You know, we're coming out of really what I consider to be the dark ages of the horse world here. The last 20 years, we've seen dressage deteriorate into something that's, as I said, much more like saddlebred training or something, where horses are very hollow. They're either hollow or they're forced over in the rollker, and their backs are up, but they're up and tense. You know, all of these things will destroy your horse. So it doesn't matter whether it's hollow or if you have it overly tight across the back, as I said, like people who rollker horses. The same thing happens, that is, it totally destroys all the joints in the leg, because tension will do that. So even if a horse is not hollow, once again, but working with its back, but stiff over its back, as we see in all horses that have been rollkered. And remember what rollkering is. It's nothing more than strangling a horse into submission by breaking at the third vertebrae, so that you can actually close off the entire windpipe of the horse when you do it. So that's really no method to train horses. Really good leg yields here. Once again, beautiful work here. Absolutely rhythmic. See how the shoulders leading perfectly? That's exactly what I want to see. You know, I was just thinking today, just on a thought, that you know, in our dressage tests here, now what you have on your dressage test, on your tests for the collective marks at the end, I'm not sure over there, but we have a mark for submission. And I was just thinking last night how really, what a wrong impression that gives horses. We don't want horses to submit to us. We want them to cooperate with us. So I was thinking we should really change that submission mark to, you know, harmony between horse and rider, or something to that effect, rather than just submission, because submission sounds like something that, you know, you force an animal or a person to do, and that's not what we really want. We want them to cooperate. So maybe cooperation would be the right thing to say a mark for. And of course, it should be a mark for both horse and rider, because as you begin to learn to ride more correctly, now this is a better shoulder in here, what you will find is that most of the disagreements we see in between horse and riders are usually caused by the rider. If nothing else, a rider asking for something, in most cases, the horse is not prepared to do, even though it may be something very simple. Now that was a really good shoulder in that time, as opposed to the one we saw on the other side. That was really good, had about the right amount of angle, so that was really excellent. So once again, getting back to my point, you know, they should not be submissive. They should be cooperating with us. So I'd like to see a mark for harmony between horse and rider. That's really what it's all about. Because there's not a horse in the world, and I have trained many, many, many of them, to the point of thousands by this point in my life, you know, and I've just never seen a horse that didn't go better working in this way and relaxed and swinging over its back. They all begin to relax, and we get all these things that we see people working so hard to get, but they just don't get that element, that if the horse is either tense or hollow, it's going to be difficult for the horse to do anything that we ask it to do. So really good walk work there. I love how you went right into the stretch from the trot, right into a nice swinging back. Really, really good. Exactly what we'd like to see. Now, as for your subsequent lessons, what we want to talk about, this horse is stretching all the way down. So people ask, well, do we just stretch for a year? No, as soon as you can get the horse to stretch all the way down, you can begin bringing them back up. So the next session that I see of you, what I'd like to see you begin to raise the pole. So that's the next challenge is, once we can get them all the way down, how high can we bring the pole without shortening the neck back into the body, that being the optimal point there, and keep exactly the same gait. That's what we're looking for. So once again, if frame destroys movement, the frame has no value whatsoever. We're not creating statues. We're creating horses that have to move and cover distance and over time. So we want them to do that efficiently. Now, as to your trot work, this is just about a perfect working trot for this horse right here. This is really, really good. It's swinging well over his back. It's not too fast. Yet he looks like there's something in reserve. So we don't want to be lengthening a horse. In other words, we don't want to be doing an extended trot or lengthening the stride all the time. But every horse has a different length of stride, and this horse has a nice, big, beautiful swinging stride, and we want to find that normal stride that's just about right there. That's just about where we want. In other words, we always want the horse, we want to find that trot that has the deepest step under the body with the slowest rhythm. So sometimes we have to compromise a little bit. Some horses have to go a little faster, some a little slower until they gain more control. But know that our goal in later on is that, of course, we want the horse to slow down but take big, deep steps and lift its front end. So that's what we're looking for. So this working trot you have here is really very, very good. It's very exemplary. And notice how in the stretch here, the horse's nose is out and down and not curling back. So this is really, really good work. Once again, if you were in a dressage test and you did a stretch like this, in the dressage test, this would be a 9. That's exactly what they're looking for right there. And I'm not sure exactly what your federation tests are at the lower levels, but in the United States, all the tests incorporate stretching, and that was put in there because the people who understood it, knew that the stretch was so important to proving the correct training of the horse. Once again, if your horse can't stretch over its back, it's probably not correctly trained. It's probably stiff and hollow, like so many we see today. And so often at the horse show, I see trainers who never even try to do this at home. They just tell their riders, oh, when you get to the stretch, just kind of let their nose out. But the stretch, like the walk, is a coefficient of 2. So especially at these lower levels, it's a very, very valuable movement just in terms of the scores. And when you can stretch like that, what you're doing right there is exactly what a judge would like to see in the stretch. And of course, then you would just be able to bring the horse back up. So remember, in your next video, we're talking about what I'd like to see you do is start bringing the pole upwards. So all you do is just give a little upwards feel on your hands and begin to raise the pole, but once again, without shortening the neck. We must get out of this idea of pulling the neck back into the body that we see so many people doing that they think is collection. Nothing could be further than the truth. This is absolutely beautiful work here, and if you work like this, I guarantee you that in almost no time, you're going to see this horse develop into a beautiful swinging back. A horse like this is going to turn into something really wonderful. And of course, they all do. That's the thing, is any horse, that's hollow, its movement is going to be improved tenfold when you get it over its back. It's why so many trainers today, just simply won't train anything, unless it's, I don't know what it's like where you are there in Europe, but where we are here in America, almost no trainers will even take a green horse, and the so-called dressage trainers send their babies out to be started by cowboys who ruin them. That's the first thing they do is, all the cowboys think, oh, they feel the horse's back up. They've got to push that back down because people will be afraid of it because they think it's going to buck. So yes, we have to teach our horses not to buck, which is a very important part of this. And of course, when we just make them more comfortable in the work, they usually give up the idea of bucking us off because we're not making them miserable if we've done all this correctly. So really good sitting trot here. Now that's exactly what we want to have happen. There was no change in the rhythm of the horse at all when you set to the trot. So really when you reach that point is pretty much a point where I could tell you this horse is ready to come on up a little bit. So now that doesn't mean we don't stretch to the same degree every day. We do. In fact, most of the important work is going to be done there. But once we get the stretch like this and the horse can really support us in that sitting trot a little bit, then we know that pretty much the horse is ready to start the journey back in the other direction. And so what we simply do is just bring the reins up a little bit. You can maybe even raise your hands a little bit because remember, we don't want any backwards tension. We don't want to shorten the neck. We just want to raise the pole. Look how beautiful this is. And when she sits the trot, once again, there's absolutely no change in the rhythm. This is absolutely exemplary work. And once again, we're always struck, as Mr. Oliveira said, which I've quoted before, even an uninitiated observer will be struck by the beauty of a correctly trained horse because we're struck by the rhythm, just like beautiful music. You might play a beautiful note, but if it's out of time, it's not going to be any good, and it's certainly not going to draw anybody into the music. Well, the same thing is true of horses. It's funny today because it seems to me like it's only only the so-called advanced level dressage riders seem to think that a hollow, overbent horse is a beautiful thing. When I've taken people who know nothing about horses to horse shows and they see what's going on in the warm-up, one person turned to me and said, well, what are they trying to do? Because it just all looks so pointless. It just looks like a ring full of people fighting with horses. So there should never be any fight in this process. If there is, you're not doing it right. And you're only putting yourself in harm's way. How beautiful that is when you sit to the trot. See, the horse did not race away from the weight. That's exactly right. That's exactly what we want to see right there. Now you could say, once again, once in a while I see your shoulders kind of go over a little bit. Just concentrate on keeping those shoulder blades flattened into your back. But really you're doing a wonderful job. That's a small thing, a very small thing. And your legs look very quiet. And once again, once you find out, so many people tell me, oh, my horse is so dead to the leg. And then I see them ride and they're hanging on the horse's mouth. So of course the horse is dead to the leg because you driving it with the brakes on all the time. So this is absolutely wonderful work. This is just what we want to see. So we would never want to lose the ability to do this no matter how high a level the horse goes to. You should always be able to start and finish in the stretch. Certainly be able to start there. Now, as the horses get more advanced, sometimes when they're done, and we've done some more difficult exercise, the cardinal rule is always, when you've really had a breakthrough with the horse and it's really understood something, stop and get off, no matter, even if it's only been 10 minutes that you've been going. And you'll find the next time you'll come back, the horse will really understand it. But if we, really have a difficult point we're working on, or some difficult exercise that the horse has had a little trouble with, once we get that, if we stop, he'll understand it. But if we then go on and do 10 more things, the next time you come back, it'll probably be just as hard to do that other thing as well. So the horse really recognizes it when you recognize his correctness and reward him for it. So once again, beautiful sitting trot here. No real change in the rhythm at all there. That's really, really good work. So this horse is definitely ready to start the journey back upwards in its day. So once again, the next video I tape of you, I'd like to see a similar kind of warm-up like this, getting them all the way down. And then I'd like to see you begin to experiment with just bringing the pole up, seeing how high, in other words, can we bring the pole up and keep it soft in the jaw and the pole and not break back in the neck. And the reason that we see such an epidemic today of all these horses that are broken at the third vertebrae, and once again, if you don't know what I'm talking about there, when you see horses whose necks seem to go at a slant upwards and then about a foot back from the neck seems to flatten out like there's a crease there, and then the head is always a little bit behind the vertical. So that shows the horse that's been forced against the hand. Because remember, if the horse's back is not up, it can never flex at the jaw and pole correctly. So that's why we see so many horses today overflex and broken at the third vertebrae, which anybody who's rolkering horses, every horse that's rolkered is broken at the third or fourth vertebrae. In other words, and that's like having a short circuit in your wiring. Nothing's going to ever work exactly right when you do that. I mean, yes, if you're, the kind of, super talented rider that can get up there and, rolker a horse and beat it half to death and force it into a frame, and you're fast enough to do that, it's certainly not something you want to do, is not what I'm saying here, but you get away with it. People like that get away with it. And then they try to teach other people, and what a disaster that we get. The horse totalist should stand as a cautionary tale for everybody else in the horse business. I mean, a very expensive tale of people just taking a horse that had been pretty correct and within no time at all turning it into, well, what you see with that horse, which isn't much anymore. And considering how much they paid for them. So once again, it's not always a good thing to just throw money at this, And once again, dressage was always the thing that's for people who really love horses and really want to study this in depth. And once again, unfortunately, it just became another silly horse show class, so to speak. And unfortunately, it got filled with a lot of people who chose dressage because they were afraid to do anything else on the back of the horse, And that's not a reason to call yourself a dressage rider. Just because you can afford to buy a very expensive horse and a very expensive saddle that says dressage on it doesn't make you a dressage rider. In fact, I would say that if you don't really have a deep love of the animals, you're really not a dressage rider at all. And if you're certainly not getting them working over their backs, or you're doing so in tension, you're not a dressage rider. But this is absolutely wonderful work that you are doing here today. One of the best submissions that I've gotten yet, and this is really great. And if you can start influencing some of the people around you, how wonderful that will be. And there he comes up a little bit. That's really quite nice, really quite nice. So once again, in that next video, I still want to see him come up a little higher and see if you can sustain it. See what happens when you do that. Now, of course, if you encounter a loss of rhythm or you encounter resistance, let the horse back down again, because the horse is basically telling you that he's not quite ready to do that yet. But everything you've done here has just been exemplary work. He's showing me a nice swinging back when you're sitting to the trot. We can see that he's able to maintain the same rhythm. Now, once again, what we can see, however, is where we have some development to go. Once again, as we see this horse in silhouette as it comes around here, you can see that there's still a little bit of a dip behind the saddle there, and you can see that the belly, the flanks are still a little bit distended. So we're going to see that begin to come up too in a very short period of time. Even there, it's actually starting to engage a little more. So once again, we should see the line of the abdominal wall beginning to form right at the edge of the lower part of the rib cage, about right where your heel hangs generally. So this one has a little bit of ways to go, before that's going to be absolutely perfect. But the way you're doing it here, it's going to develop all by itself. And once again, when we do this correctly, we're not encountering, as you see here, she's not encountering any resistance at all because she has this horse working perfectly over its back. So the horse is happy to do the work. If people would only realize that the resistance they have with these animals is just that they're trying to make them submit. Once again, there's that submission mark again, which is, it's like the half halt. I don't use the word half halt because it makes people think of stopping. And of course, in German and in French, it's a different word that doesn't have that connotation of stopping. So in American, or rather in English, half halt sort of makes people sound like you're stopping. It makes them think like something you do with the front end. When in reality, a real rebalancing of the horse, which is what a half halt is, starts by sending the horse forward underneath the body, because that's the only thing that can really change, getting that impulse to move through the body of the horse to the bridle, where then we can take contact and soften it a little bit, control the speed. But that's the other thing, is the better you get at this, and of course this only works if you're riding horses on the way to the rein, is you are able to use your back to influence the horse. By, if you have a horse that's speeding away, you want to lift your shoulders up and back and get a little bit behind the motion. So always use your back before you use your hands. And you'll find your horses will respond so much faster. Now this is all really good work. Now that's a little higher there. Now that's pretty good right there. And that's probably about as high as he can come right there today. But that's looking really good. So that's all there is to it. After you get this, you simply get them all the way down and you start bringing them up. And what you're going to see over the next year with a horse like this is his frame is going to change. A year from now, if you ride like this, the conformation of the horse will look very different than it does now. And that's the thing for people to realize who don't have nice, big, expensive horses. That any horse you have, you can change dramatically if you're willing to do this work over enough time to have it really have the effect that a good foundation has. Once again, it takes about 2 years to put a foundation on the horse. But once you do that, everything else becomes easy. Beautiful stretch here again. This is absolutely lovely work to watch. I could watch a horse like this go around all day long. Well, I guess I do. So I never get tired of seeing horses work like this. Worked in rhythm. How beautiful they look. Absolutely fantastic, and she lets them all the way down there. So I could see that you're experimenting that a little bit with bringing the pole up, and I think that last bit you did was quite nice and probably about right. I think it won't be long before you'll be able to bring the pole up even a little higher than that. There she comes up a little higher there, and that's about right. So just remember, if the neck bends over, I can't really tell with this horse whether it's been broken before in the neck, but it doesn't look too bad. The way the horse is stretching out, it couldn't have been too bad, because the horse is stretching out correctly. That is, goes out and down and not just down and over. Whenever we stretch horses, which confuses people, when we stretch the ones that have been broken at the third vertebrae, they always look behind the bit because they already have a permanent crease in their neck, so to speak. It's already bent over, so we get them to stretch. They come behind the bridle a little bit. But this horse isn't doing that, so that's really good. And once again, when you go out to look at horses to buy, the number one thing I look at in terms of horses is whether or not they've been, of course, whether they have a top line or not, but whether they've been broken in the neck or not. And the same thing with young horses. Sometimes I go out to find young horses, and if somebody has started them who didn't know what they're doing, it's amazing how much damage people can do lunging horses with over-tightened side reins and these kind of things, which is usually how horses start out getting broken at the third vertebrae. And while I am a fan of long reining horses, it's really something that should only be done by people who really know what they're doing. Because the hardest thing with long reining is getting horses not to overbend, because you've got really good. It's like having these long draw reins on the horse. You can really pull them behind the bit very easily. So that's why I don't do a whole lot of that, nor advise others to do a whole lot of that, because unless you really know what you're doing, it can be very counterproductive to what you're doing. But this is absolutely wonderful. This working trot you've gotten here is literally picture perfect. Once again, really good sitting trot here. Nice and swinging, no change in the rhythm. This is absolutely excellent work. Maybe you'll work towards becoming an Art to Ride associate trainer, which we would love to see all over the world. It sounds like you already are beginning to inspire people around you, and that's what I want everyone to do. That's my goal. My goal someday is to go to the Olympic Games, and we won't have to put 12-foot walls around the warm-up arena because people are so embarrassed about or trying to hide what they're doing. That was one of the most upsetting things, you know, to see, because I remember for myself, one of the most important lessons I ever saw was watching Klimke warm up for the Los Angeles Olympic Games when he broke all the records there, and he came out and stretched his horse in a snaffle bridle. You know, he would stretch it, bring it up, do a couple of exercises, stretch it again, bring it back, and then of course he went in and had the most beautiful ride to date that we'd ever seen. So that's the kind of work that we want to see. And once again, I just, someone wrote me the other day, because you'll hear me talk about Marcus Enning quite often from Germany, the jumping rider. And I guess he just had a retirement ceremony for his horse after 20 years. So that's wonderful here. Retired him at 20 years, after 20-year jumping career, and retired him sound. That should be all of our goals. Unfortunately, horses have become too expendable. You know, and I don't care how wealthy you are, you know, if you're just buying horse after horse after horse, you're never going to really learn how to ride. You're never going to really get the kind of cooperation from a horse and harmony between you and the horse that you're going to with a horse that you've spent time with and really gotten them working correctly. Because it takes time. So if your horse is going lame after 2 years and you're replacing it, it takes 2 years to just get to the place where the horse has really become very cooperative and really start trying in the work that we do. That was a really nice downwards transition, by the way, there in the walk. But I'm sure this horse is trying really great for you. And look at just how wonderful it's been. There hasn't been any, you know, there hasn't been hardly anything that's disrupted the stride of this horse or its rhythm, the flow of the movement. That's what we want. It's about beautiful ballet. I mean, imagine if you went to see a ballet and, you know, half of the ballerinas in the corps were overweight and stopped working halfway through and, you know, and threw themselves on the ground. Well, that would be kind of like what we see a lot of horses doing, because, you know, they're trying to do work they simply cannot do. So they become resistive. So you can see how most horses in the world are very, you know, willing to do what we want to do. Now, I've trained I've trained wild horses, you know, that have come off of these wild herds, those sort of things. And I've trained them all using the same methods, and they all end up being lovely animals that are predictable and become a joy for someone to ride and work with. A good sitting trot there, and I see you bring the pole up a little bit. That's quite good, and that would be about as high, and I like how you didn't shorten the neck back. That's a really nice canter right about there for this horse. That's pretty good. I love how you didn't shorten the frame up. So, you know, big horses, we have to work in a big open frame, just like we do small horses. So they're all relative. So once again, when you've got to choose a horse, we have to be sure that we choose horses that are, you know, whose gaits aren't too big. You know, horses are very much like waves, and it's like surfing. You know, it's easy to surf a big wave until you fall, but when something goes wrong, it goes wrong, and it goes wrong fast, and you can get killed. So the horses are the same way. If you're, you know, you want to be sure that not only can you ride a horse, you can ride a horse when the worst thing happens, you know, and it spooks at something and leaps 5 feet in the air with you. You know, if you haven't got the skill to ride a big scopy horse, you're probably going to shut that horse down, which is what we've seen happen so much in dressage, because we've seen a lot of people go out and buy these very, very big horses with giant movement, and they're barely beginners. You know, so those are cases usually of the trainers going out and buying horses for people that they want for themselves, and not choosing a horse that's actually appropriate for the student. So this is really good canter work. It's cantering well enough over his back that this is all really successful and going to be very helpful for him, and how relaxed and rhythmic it all is. A really good canter work here. And look how nice and long the neck is. Once again, we don't want to shorten the neck back. When we correctly train a horse, then the top line builds up, the withers pull up through the shoulders, and the horse's frame actually changes, and the neck will actually be carried at a different position all by itself, but the horse has to have the muscling to do that, where if we artificially pull the neck up in the air and try to hold it there or force it to stay there and then force the horse to canter, that's why we see so many horses at the upper levels today. They come back to a walk and their walks are all 4 beat. Once again, that's why all the roller advocates are trying to get the walk taken out of Grand Prix, because it's the most telling thing. When they come back and they can't literally walk, they walk like camels. It tells the judge how the horse has been trained, and of course it's a huge low mark. But we must never let that happen. We must never let the walk be taken out of Grand Prix. If we do, then the cheaters will win, and it'll make it easier for them to win, because that's why they want it taken out, because they don't get good scores on those. They shouldn't get good scores on anything. Once again, remember, a horse that's not working over its back, according to the rules, would be considered insufficient for the movement. So it doesn't matter what level the horse is. If it isn't working over its back, no matter how many flying changes every stride it can do, it's really not doing dressage if it's hollow while it's doing it. And then once again, remember that at the core of dressage is the idea that we're doing work that will help the horse rather than just break the horse down, or in other words, teach the horse to go in a way that is best for the horse, like a healthful exercise, as one trainer once said. Every lesson should stop while it is still a healthful exercise for the horse, and it doesn't just deteriorate into some kind of forceful thing. But this has all been absolutely beautiful. Once again, really good canter work here. He's stretching beautifully into the contact. This is just exactly what we'd like to see. So once again, we can't hold horses up. They have to hold themselves up, and that's what this work does. Is it teaches them to hold themselves up, because we're not holding them up with our hands. So that's how you get a horse into self-carriage. There is no other way. Many of the people today who think their horses are in self-carriage are actually behind the bit. They've been broken to the third vertebrae, so they just don't ever take any real contact. They're behind the bridle all the time, which means they're really behind your leg as well. So you really can't depend on them. We've seen some upper level riders, even some who've won at the Olympic Games, have their horses go charging off with them because something excites them every time the crowd applauds. And once again, a horse that's correctly trained is not going to go crazy because a crowd applauds. But a horse that's been, subjected to basically torture in its training, every time it hears the crowd applause, it thinks, the next blow is coming. So it's looking for that's why horses become spooky, because they're looking for the next bad thing. Beautiful downwards transition in the walk there. That was exactly right. Lisette, this has been an absolutely wonderful ride. I hope everybody watches this one and takes inspiration from you. You've done a beautiful job in only your second video here and a few months' time working on this. You are right on track. The frame you had the horse in the walk was in the trot rather was absolutely what we're looking for, as it was in the walk as well. That was a good working trot, a good working walk, and a good working canter today. You had a working gaits in all 3 gaits. Remember, the term working means working over the back. That's what it means. So get that definition in your mind. Great work. This is Will Faerber from Art to Ride. I actually can't wait to see your next video. So once again, just working on bringing him up a little bit and then going through the exercises in that. Great, great job.